it was always my kind of desire to support mums, mainly, I guess, in the Asian community, communities, I should say, really, specifically my own like Gujarati community, and weirdly through like word of mouth and just through supporting family and friends, I have been doing that for quite a while, and it became a bit difficult because she's quite boisterous as well. I had to look after her and try and support mums, and then I became ill because I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. It's a hereditary condition, but my first cousin has it, and she's had it since she was 15. But for me, when Devani was 11 months old, things weren't right. And obviously went to the doctors. They were pretty good, actually. They did the test, and because I was a breastfeeding mother, I was scared about that because I've had a bad experience with a GP before where they basically just tell you to stop breastfeeding because, well, your child is nearly 1 or whatever. But I was very lucky that they actually listened to me and listened to the fact that I wanted to carry on breastfeeding till at least 2 years and beyond, ideally. And they actually persuaded the gastroenterologist at the hospital to do a colonoscopy within a fortnight. And yeah, from there onwards, I was like diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. For me, growing up, I just thought I was going to be like this badass career woman. And initially I got married. I'm from the Northwest, and originally, even after I got married, I kept my job up north. My husband working all over the place, and I had basically 2 children within the space of 20. They're only 21 months apart. I just felt actually that one of us needed to be there for the children more than what we would have if I kept my job. It was difficult initially. I wouldn't go back now and change that decision, if that makes sense. For a while, it took me a while to kind of get used to being a full-time mum. Things were different for my mum's generation then. And even though I guess my grandma's generation, they probably did try to influence my mum's generation. I think by then formula milk was being advertised as being better for babies, or that was the impression that they were given. So basically, yeah, most of my mother's generation, as far as I'm aware, they didn't really breastfeed for long, if at all. So, but they still did the postpartum period and still had all the special, all the special foods. They still had the diet and all of that. They just didn't actually feed their babies at the breast. So with my son, I breastfed him for 13 months. I fell pregnant when he was a year old again, but my husband was working. He was working away quite a lot. So, and I was back at work, and it would have just helped me to just have him in bed with me and to feed. And he was doing that sometimes, but there was always this constant pressure that he shouldn't be. So I was trying to keep him in his cot in the other room and going back and forth, just absolutely shattered. When he's teething, both my older children, they would actually vomit. They would have really major coughs and colds and vomit often at night. So I was pregnant, in early stage of pregnancy, having to deal with breastfeeding and having to deal with changing him in the night, showering him if necessary on myself, changing bedding and getting to work. And it just wasn't working out. And then I was going through the pregnancy alone, and I'd had to wean him because the doctor told me that he didn't need to have my milk anymore, and that it was taking up unnecessary energy for me to breastfeed him. But I didn't know that you can still breastfeed whilst pregnant until a midwife told me, actually tandem feed as well after if they want to. And yeah, basically then I had my daughter. and I managed to breastfeed her till she was 23 months. But we did decide not, because my son was already in the other room, which was the nursery, we decided to keep her cot in our room. And we always say to anyone that will listen that it makes such a difference, because it made such a difference with night feeds. And I was happier for it, although I was still having to go to the other room to deal with my son as well, because he was still a baby as well. But it was just easier. Certainly my dad's side, they're all in the northwest. My sister actually lives in Solihull, so we see each other every so often. But on a daily basis, no, I've only really, my husband's family are in Coventry, but my in-laws, my mother-in-law was still working when I had the older two children. My grandparents looked after myself, my sister, and my cousins during the day, and picked us up dropped us to school and picked us up. So that's where I decided that it was best that I left my paid role, and I guess just did what I had to do, really. And it was actually because I went through breastfeeding support. Anne-Marie, basically, because she's a breastfeeding counsellor, I went to her for some support, and she basically informed me that I can actually contact Wendy Jones directly through her website and ask her about any medication that I wanted to ask her about. And she actually did give me additional information about the mesalazine and the prednisolone, and said she runs a private support group for via Facebook for breastfeeding mothers who have inflammatory bowel disease. Asked if I wanted to join. So I felt really lucky, and oh my God, it's been amazing to have that support and to give the support back. So obviously I have got peer support training. So in some sense, I've been able to help other mums on that group, because we don't just support each other in relation to the inflammatory bowel disease issues. Obviously, breastfeeding issues come into it as well, and for some women, pregnancy. It can be a bit disconcerting, so I found ways around it. I did use a cover initially, and I'm not ashamed of saying to people that if you want to use a cover, then use it, but you shouldn't need to. For me, it worked until my daughter was about 1 to use a breastfeeding cover, and then after, I just had to use a shawl and try and do it like Indian style, as we call it. We've just kind of gotten on with it now. I'm going to be honest, I probably, because I'm quite large up top, it probably is still more comfortable now for me to breastfeed at home, particularly now that she's older and she just can't sit still. But I have done it in coffee shops and at people's houses. But I do find that now, especially that she's older, there are people who don't appreciate seeing an older baby being breastfed. And I'm constantly asking when am I going to stop breastfeeding?